The pension standoff continues, and the 2014 race for governor is underway. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. The legislature is coming back into town next week to deal with some stuff, and we have some experts to talk about it. With me today, Kent Redfield is back, Professor Emeritus, Political Science, University of Illinois, Springfield. Welcome back.
Good to be here.
Amanda Vinicky, Statehouse Bureau Chief for Illinois Public Radio and WUIS, based in Springfield. Amanda, welcome.
Thanks.
And aren't you glad they're not in this week? Bruce Rushton, a reporter for Illinois Times in Springfield, who knows everything about everything anyway.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, pensions. As we record this show, there's not yet an agreement between the legislative leaders of the House and Senate on what to do with pensions, which was proclaimed by Governor Quinn to be the biggest issue of the year, the money necessary for it over time, squeezing out money for other vital state programs. So let's go over where we are, Kent.
Where we are is the Speaker has filed an amendment to the Senate proposal, which is the one negotiated with the unions, that would essentially gut that bill, substitute his proposal, which is the more business-backed unilateral diminishment of pension benefits without an immediate effective date. So it would only need 30 votes in the Senate and 60 in the House. And the intention is to become a bill on Tuesday that then the House would assumedly vote on when everybody's in town for the special session. So
which is Wednesday, right?
Yeah, the Speaker has doubled down on his refusal to deal with the Senate proposal, his insistence that his bill is the only way to go.
Right, and Speaker Madigan's bill in the Senate would save more money, would cost employees more, and would not give the choice that President Cullerton's bill in the Senate would, of either a choice between like health care or your cost of living.
Yeah, if the Senate bill, if the Speaker's bill is constitutional, it would save significantly more money than the bill that Senate President John Cullerton is promoting. And so the question is whether it's constitutional or not, but that's a different issue. Right now, the Speaker believes that he can force the Senate into accepting his bill, and we'll see.
Amanda, you've seen Speaker Madigan and President Cullerton talk about their sides. Where's this going, or is there a way to guess that?
I think that, as you mentioned or alluded to at least, there is a leaders meeting. The governor has once again called both Cullerton and Madigan, as well as this time the Republican leaders, to his office. That, of course, after he had tried to previously, this was this will be the third meeting, with at least the Democrats. The first one he tried to, but Madigan was unreachable, and I think they both just looked bonkers after that fiasco. But then they had a second meeting, and that was where you saw the governor say that he wanted to go the route that Cullerton has long advocated, and that was passing both of these plans in one piece of legislation, handing it over to the courts for the courts to decide. So if and only if the Madigan version wasn't deemed constitutional, then they could move on to his version, this Plan B, that wouldn't save as much money but would perhaps be more constitutional.
Because it gives employees a choice and makes it like contractual as opposed to imposed upon employees for whom you're not supposed to diminish pension benefits under our Constitution.
But so you have all of this going. So there is a leaders meeting, but I would not anticipate that we're going to see any change coming out of it. Not only did the Speaker gut Cullerton's legislation, that's significant there, more than just for the policy of it. It's also, I think, telling. I mean, that's kind of a knife in the back of Cullerton in the sense that he could have gutted various pieces of legislation. There are all sorts of ways that he could have, brought that in and further advanced the Madigan version.
In other words, put the amendment on a bill that wasn't the
That
Senate bill that came over.
Senate bill. Yeah. And instead, it is doing that, and I think further driving a wedge between the House and Senate. Maybe that is Madigan's plan. Of course, he has been seen as this chess player. When everybody else is playing checkers, he gets a lot of credit for thinking ahead. Who knows? Maybe this is all part of a far broader scheme in terms of trying to, appease the business community and say, hey, I tried, look how hard I tried. Maybe, who the heck knows? But at this point, I think that it is further driving a wedge between the House and Senate. We think so much in terms of partisan when we talk politics. And of course, yes, you have Democrats that have a supermajority, but I think that it's beyond that. You've got to think of each caucus as sort of its own team. And what you have, I think, is the Senate Democrats really going behind their captain in Cullerton and not liking the insults that the Speaker has thrown and every kind of little step, every little dig in the back. Insults. So, for instance, again, gutting this bill. That's the second time that he's taken a major piece of Cullerton pension legislation and used it as a vehicle for his own version. He also had said after the Madigan plan got trounced in the Senate, Madigan said to a reporter for the Sun-Times that it showed a failure of leadership on Cullerton's part.
Who's that? Yeah, and of course, when I saw President Cullerton end of session, he said, we really get along, we're getting along okay, you're not believing that.
Exactly. And Cullerton trying to, I think, take the high road in that had to have stung. I think that Cullerton is somebody who does care about his public face very much.
Bruce, are you going to buy the Speaker a cell phone, or what's the deal?
Well, no, I mean, absolutely.
Let's talk about why I said
and
that.
he can use any telephone number he wants. He doesn't even have to tell me about it. But I'm just very skeptical. I mean, I could wake up tomorrow and be all wrong, and they've solved every issue having to do with pensions, and boy, won't we look silly. But I think we need to look back at if they could have solved this issue, if this was really something that was solvable from a political standpoint, they would have done it back in January during the lame duck session when they had some votes that didn't, there were some free votes there that there weren't going to be repercussions. That they couldn't do it then, I think, is very telling. And I'm skeptical here that this is anything more than more political maneuvering with an eye toward next year's elections. I mean, this is going to be something that Quinn presumably can use on the campaign trail, saying, "Hey, I'm the voice of reason. I tried to play, the peacemaker here and get some sort of agreement." And the Speaker doesn't have a cell phone, so I mean, I think that
right.
plays.
And that's because he didn't come to the first meeting, and somebody said that he couldn't be reached, or
I think it was Brown. Don't quote me, but the official word got out that the Speaker of the House does not own a cell phone.
Yeah,
so.
of course. Did anybody here see that video from, I think it's Chuck Gowdy, was at Channel 7 in Chicago, where you haven't seen Speaker Madigan come under this kind of scrutiny on Chicago TV in a long time. It was more like what used to happen to Rod Blagojevich, but the station staked out the Speaker to see where he was, and they saw him almost arrive at his home and then go to his office and then not come out of his office and then leave in somebody else's car, all on camera. And why, because Speaker Madigan, when he speaks, he's a very smart person and he could speak for himself, but he chose not to, and that made bad TV. Why would he do that?
Yeah,
or was it worth it, or was it fair for the TV station to do that?
Well, fair or unfair, I mean, that's the way that you conduct journalism, and it's a way that you get people to put them on the spot to talk. Now, the Speaker is an intensely private person. There's absolutely no question about that. And actually, the way that he kind of got bad publicity out of this may in fact have strengthened his resolve in terms of pushing forward with his plan. Now, just as an aside, I mean, the fact that whether the Speaker did or didn't have a cell phone and kind of people going ballistic, it's really very generational, the sort of thing, and it makes you realize what a great leader Abraham Lincoln was, because
Lincoln had a cell phone.
He won the Civil War and freed the slaves.
They did have telegraph.
without a cell phone.
I saw in the movie he was
in
the telegraph office.
Well, it's not like he's unreachable. It's not like he,
No,
I mean,
he's
even if you don't have a cell phone, there are people that are around him that do. He's lasted without cell phone. We've known that. He doesn't have email. If I knew, I mean, I've been aware that he doesn't have a cell phone. Why was
we found out from The Apprentice, Blagojevich couldn't even turn on a computer.
Yeah.
Well, I think what resonates about it is that it's kind of a statement, I think, that belies a certain amount of arrogance or perceived arrogance on the part of the Speaker. I'm above this. I'm the emperor here, so to speak. And that's how it came off. Whether he intended it or not, that's how it came off, I think, to the public. And so when the Chicago television station goes and follows him, the reason they do that is because when someone makes a statement like that, I think they've overstepped, and they've invited that sort of scrutiny.
Yeah, I think it is kind of interesting. There was a forum within the last week or two in Springfield about, are there really two states? And it was at UIS. Chicago versus the rest of the state, and former Governor Edgar was there, who basically defended Madigan, and he's done this before, saying when I was governor, Madigan was smart. Maybe we'd be in worse shape if he wasn't there, because he's the smartest, negotiator, and he will work with you at the appropriate time, kind of thing. So I don't know. I throw that in there because that's from a established Republican with a
There are really two things there. I mean, obviously, a leadership and power vacuum in the governor's office makes it more difficult for the system to work, and we have both of those. The governor doesn't show leadership.
Doesn't get it done.
He doesn't get it done.
Yeah,
he doesn't
twist the arms right to get it done.
Doesn't know how to leverage the office.
He doesn't have a plan.
Yeah, no, I mean, weak on policy, also weak on, governors get things done because they can help people or hurt people. And no one wants Pat Quinn's help, and no one's afraid of Pat Quinn. So, he's in a very weak position. Now, I think one explanation of what's going on is this is all about the elections going forward.
And we had House Republican leader Tom Cross come out and make that accusation.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if you kind of look at Madigan and you look at two-tiered pensions and you look at education reform from a couple of years ago, you look at concealed carry, the way he likes to operate is to get a position that he can leverage that is a win-win.
You're talking about the governor?
No, I'm sorry, the speaker.
Okay.
The speaker in terms of two-tiered pensions and education reform and concealed carry. He likes to get in a position where it's a win-win, where he gets the policy, or if there's failure, someone else gets the blame. And so if he wins on pensions and it goes in front of the court, either he solves the problem and it's off the table for a long period of time, or if the court throws it out, then you blame the court for the tax increase. So there is a method in this madness. There's an end game there that does make a certain amount of sense. If he can force the Senate into acting, then he can't lose when this goes in front of the Supreme Court, because he's done everything the business community asks, and if the court throws it out, then it's their fault that the legislature has to
I do want to get back to the point Amanda made, and Tom Cross, the House Republican leader, was asked, is this really, maybe the Democrats are all conspiring to fail on pensions to make Governor Quinn look bad so that Lisa Madigan, who is the Attorney General, who might run for governor, look better if she runs for governor, and Tom Cross just said yes, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then, of course, the Democrats all denied this. That's ludicrous. So, but
including the Attorney General herself.
Right.
Although, there's so many ways to look at it, and that's where I think that, yes, maybe this is an eye toward 2014, but you have so many different factions, and who knows how this will play out. Yes, I do think it makes Pat Quinn look terrible. He has said for years now he's sleeping day and night. Well, he sure as heck must be one tired guy, because it is unresolved.
I think you meant staying awake day and night, working day and night.
There we go. We have.
I want to be sleeping day and night.
We have the governor looking bad because it isn't resolved. But I think the Democrats all look bad. They are angering at least members of the House that are going along with the Madigan plan. A prime constituency is unions. You have teachers in every district,
and
so
the
that's
unions,
out there.
The unions want the Cullerton plan because they agreed to it.
Exactly.
Although it saves less money, so then editorial writers don't like it as much as the Madigan plan.
Right, and so who do you please?
Yeah. Or at least editorial writers in the big city. I think actually our paper liked the Cullerton plan. Anyway, go ahead.
Were this plan were any sort of pension issue to get resolved before the election? Yeah, maybe it would look good on the part of Governor Quinn, because he, of course, would take credit whether or not he deserves it, and whether it was him that made it pass, he would pat himself on the back.
Always the buck stops there.
Exactly, that's how it goes. But it would also be free so that whoever is next governor wouldn't have that on their plate. The state could move forward. So if you think, hey, Lisa Madigan has a chance, and not only do we want her to, win, we want her to succeed as governor. If you're thinking like that as, her father, for example, then get it off the table. Right. So there are so many permutations to look at what it could mean for 2014.
Yeah, well, that's what political, analysts do, and anything
we
we say is right, because it might be. You look like you might want to say something. There was one other issue on the table, or not on the table, but we have now, I guess, the court has given the state, another month to decide or enact concealed carry. The legislature acting basically because of pressure from the federal appeals court that said, you have to become the 50th state to allow concealed carry. They passed a plan, even though it allows local governments to have some say in gun laws other than concealed carry. The governor, as we sit here, has not yet acted on this. He's expected perhaps to veto it, and then the legislature will override. But we don't have concealed carry in Illinois. Where does this stand, and will we become like other states?
Well, I think.
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, right now we've got at least 2 states' attorney downstate that said, "Hey, we're tired of this. It is de facto the law now in at least 2 counties in Illinois." And if they do keep playing games with it, I think that's going to spread. And talk about 2 states. I mean, you go a certain point south, and there is going to be de facto concealed carry. In terms of the July 9th deadline that the feds have met, nobody really knows, I think, what would happen then. But how do you then start enforcing violations of concealed firearms if defense attorneys have this law from the highest courts in the land, for the federal government at least, saying this is unconstitutional? How can a state court judge then not dismiss a charge that the federal government has found to be, in fact, based in an unconstitutional law? And that's not necessarily a theoretical issue. There's at least one case here in Sangamon County where somebody with a FOID card is facing unlawful use of firearms. And
Before they even changed this law.
Before they even changed the law. I believe the violation occurred a year or so ago. Mm-hmm. And that argument has been made. The trial court judge says, well, let's wait until the legislature acts, and they could be waiting a long time.
The legislature did.
They did.
I
stand corrected.
Until state law is changed.
Until the state.
Because the governor has not yet acted.
Yeah, what is the governor going to do? I mean, is this going to be how Quinn tries to assert himself, either in an attempt to move pension negotiations or in general, because he is seen as weak? I don't think he likes that. That is his image. Will he try and assert himself here? You've had the Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart coming out and saying that he doesn't think the plan is, the legislation is a good one because, for example, he thinks law enforcement won't be able to do its duty in making sure that those who apply for permits are worthy of carrying them, that there isn't some sort of mental or previous crime issue. Or what if they're on the list and, okay, you're approved for a permit, there's no means for law enforcement to take it away? Will we see Quinn try and either veto or mandatorily veto the legislation to try and get that fixed, he's long wanted an assault weapons ban, for example, try and get that in? Or does that throw things in shambles? Is there too much pressure on Quinn to go ahead and sign it because we have the July 9th legislation looming, and would you be able to get a veto-proof majority to get something ahead of that deadline? There's a lot of anticipation he would try and do it before they came back Wednesday, so that would be the time, but we haven't seen any action thus far.
Well, I mean, I think something needs to be done, regardless of what you do. I mean, this is an issue that demands leadership, and whether you decide X, Y, or Z, decide X, Y, or Z, because the devil you know, I think, is going to be better than the devil you don't. And so if state government, the governor, legislature collectively can't make a decision on something like guns, how can we expect that they're going to make a decision on something like pensions?
It looks bad. You would expect on past history that the governor is going to veto or mandatorily
right, because he's
veto
such a gun
the bill,
control guy. Mm-hmm.
And the legislature will require a special session at pick a number, $40,000 a day.
Well, unless they combine it when they come in this week, but that might be a little quick and early.
That doesn't look likely. He wants to focus on pensions, and so I expect he's going to veto it. They'll have to come back and override it. The legislature doesn't want to have another roll call on guns, and so this will not help the governor's standing with the legislature, but he'll be able to make a public pronouncement. Now, clearly after July 9th, the Illinois law is no longer in effect, and you would be in a position where home rule municipalities would be able to pass concealed carry ordinances just like before, and you would have to litigate them in terms of whether or not they were reasonable. I mean, that's just chaos, and the legislature avoided that by coming up with a compromise bill. And I can't. The most effective thing for the governor to do would say, this is a terrible bill, but I'm going to sign it because the courts, we have to act.
Well,
but
and he's probably listening right now, so this could happen.
I don't expect that to happen.
Okay.
Back to politics.
Speaking of politics, and speaking of the governor's own party and 2014 looming, Bill Daley, brother of former Mayor Richard M. Daley, son of late Mayor Richard J. Daley, announced an exploratory committee on video and in a couple of interviews here and there for governor, saying that nothing is getting done in Springfield with the current regime, and I am examining a run for a governor. Any thoughts? Obviously, he joins. We don't know if Lisa Madigan's going to get on the Democratic side. We'll talk about the Republicans in a second, but thoughts about Bill Daley getting into this?
We'll see.
Go ahead. No.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I mean, have you ever seen Bill Daley in Springfield? I did once, I believe, at an inauguration.
I don't believe that I ever have.
He is a former
exactly.
Commerce Secretary and was a Chief of Staff to President Obama, which may
He's
or
got
may
a
not,
resume,
which is
yeah.
which is popular in Chicago, maybe not beyond in some areas.
And I'm
Bernie,
not
you
sure.
must do well on trivia shows. That's true.
Just about politics, please.
I mean, I'm not sure how well he's known outside of Chicago, and in Chicago, whereas the Daley name has long been loved or at least known.
Or at least
I'm not
synonymous
sure
with
that's,
power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's the case anymore because I think his brother made a whole lot of enemies with this whole parking meter deal and people paying a lot more just to have their car in the city of Chicago.
Yeah, they sold
and
the rights for, what,
that's
70
now the
years to a
association
private
with
company.
Daley.
Yeah.
And so as of now, we really haven't seen a lot of power coming out from this. It's just he announced an exploratory committee. It's not paperwork to officially be on. His spokesperson says he's in 100%, but it is sure, he's in 100%. I talked to one political scientist that said, sure, that means he's in now for 100%.
Yeah, and we always believe political scientists. So, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, he has been someone's been mentioned as a candidate for all kinds of office in Illinois, partially because of his political family, and but he is not the kind of person that is well known to county chairman. He's not been active in the party organization. Now, clearly, if Lisa Madigan decides not to run, he's in a strong position in the Democratic primary. If people assume Pat Quinn is unelectable, and that
Everybody but Pat Quinn.
Somebody with the
because he says he's in.
organization, and if it's a one-on-one race, he could be in a pretty good position. But clearly, there isn't. This smacks a little bit of kind of, it's my turn. I'm entitled, without.
Or my family is out of it, so now I'm clear to do it.
Yeah.
And I was Commerce Secretary, I was Chief of Staff, I know how to run government, and somebody needs to know how to run government. I mean, that's certainly the message.
Yeah, the resume is.
But he has talked about it before and has never pulled the trigger, and so there's this expectation that maybe he won't again, but we'll see.
And if you've never been a legislator or worked with a legislature, if you've never managed a large-scale public bureaucracy, then those are things that governors have to do, and it doesn't always translate. The business experience or even governmental experience as being a chief of staff doesn't always translate into being able to lead in terms of what governors do.
See, on the Republican side, we have now two official candidates, which is, or at least exploratory, but official. Bruce Rauner, who is basically about a billionaire who does venture capital and lives in Winnetka part of the time and has a Chicago residence and apparently has a ranch somewhere else. But he came out with a video, but then did some interviews. I did one. He named like 5 leaders of unions. He said they were public sector unions. One was not, although the guy with that union has a PAC that donates to everybody, and said they're more powerful. The unions have been more powerful than like the Speaker of the House, the President, and the Senate. So we've got to take away, bring common sense, take away some of that union leadership stuff. Even though I love union members,
corporations have no influence in Illinois.
Well, I'm just wondering. So there's him, and then there's State Treasurer Dan Rutherford, who I first covered when he ran for student body president at Illinois State University in the 1970s.
Did he win?
He did. He had hair down to here. But he is also running for governor, and that is expected. He did it in a more traditional way. He had to fly around to various cities, including Springfield, and said, he's the only Republican that's won statewide. So, because he is now treasurer, the only Republican who won statewide who's running for governor at this point. We know that Kirk Dillard, state senator from Hinsdale, is planning a run again and has backing of Jim Edgar, for example, because he was his chief of staff. And Bill Brady, state senator from Bloomington, will be in the running. How's this looking?
It's looking like another circular firing squad to me.
They really hurt themselves last time because Bill Brady won the nomination with 20% of the vote and then had to
I
get known.
think that the smart money says that Dillard would be governor today, but for Ryan having entered the Republican primary last year, or excuse me, the last election. And I think
Jim Ryan, right?
Jim Ryan. I'm
Right.
sorry. I'm sorry. So I mean, and I think that there's a lot of credence that can be made in that argument. And I think now you've got several strong candidates. I don't know. These are some fairly big names. And could they end up with nothing like they did last time? I think that's a good question to ask.
Yes. Any handicapping of the Republican side in particular?
Well, you never know. Money gets you organization. It gives you name recognition. You don't know until somebody gets out there as a first-time candidate, as Rayner is, whether or not they're ready for prime time. And so that's going to be a really critical question. There's a long list of, the last one probably being Rod Gidwich, of a wealthy businessman
Helene
that went out and
Curtis,
spent a ton of money and ran fourth. So, the potential is there because it gives you a huge advantage. But it is also kind of this problem of, you've got to run to the right, you're attacking the unions. He didn't call out Doug Whitley, who's the head of the Chamber of Commerce, or Greg Bayes, the head of the Illinois Manufacturers Association, or a couple of interest groups that have some influence in Springfield. And so, if you run to the right and then have to run to a middle, that causes a problem. So, he's the wild card at this point.
Bruce Rauner.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
Ruth Rutherford is kind of the new face, and he's won statewide, and he's not Brady, and he's not Dillard.
Well, and all the Republican organizations know him because he's been doing nothing but campaigning for like 30 years through the Illinois House.
Basically, since you first met him in 1970, he hasn't stopped since.
So again, we're less than a minute. Lisa Madigan getting in or not? We're just guessing.
She just says that she's seriously considering it, and I think that it is one of those things where everybody is waiting. It's not just the governor's race. You're waiting to see who's going to run potentially for her spot, who's going to declare for treasurer, who's going to declare for pretty much name an office, and they want to know, is Lisa Madigan running or not? I do think that it will not be ignored that, yes, her father is Speaker Mike Madigan. All these stories that we've been talking about are hurting that very much.
There you go. And Bob Schillerstrom, who ran one of those Republican candidates last time, who took votes away from Dillard, now wants to run for state treasurer, made an announcement this last week. On that note, Kent Redfield, Amanda Vinicky, Bruce Rushton, thank you for your comments and help. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.